Okay. All right. So curse manifesto. So I'm going to be real clear before I start reading this curse manifesto. I haven't really had a major issue with curses. The only thing that bugs me a little tiny bit about curses is that my hexes are basically worthless on bosses. But that hasn't been a real issue for me personally because I don't boss anyway. So meh. Otherwise, I really just hope they don't remove the ability for me to curse on hit with things like ring rolls or glove implicits, things like that, because we use those really heavily to enable things like occultist explosions and stuff like that. Like I don't even care. I really don't even care if they nerf them, to be honest. Those curses are pretty close to worthless anyway. It's just the act of having a curse on the mob that I care about, not the actual curse itself. So really all my hope is that they don't take away the things that I use. If they do anything positive, great. But just don't take away my curse on hit. That's all I got. Just don't take away my curse on hit. All right. The last three manifestos covered dual element mitigation, the replacements of arch nemesis modifiers, and eldritch altars. That was a sad one. That was a sad one there. These two were good. That one was sad. In today's final 3.20 manifesto, we're discussing changes to curse, specifically hexes. Our goal of making their effectiveness against difficult rarities monsters more balanced. I'm scared. Does that mean better or worse? Because they're already really bad. Yeah, let's skip the TLDR. We'll skip the TLDR entirely. Right. Hex strength against different monster tier. Currently, hex builds are at their weakest against monsters where they matter the most, and they're strongest when they matter the least. True story. This is partially because hexes have hidden penalties which reduce their effectiveness when fighting unique monsters and pinnacle bosses, currently 33 and 66% respectively. Yes, absolutely. This is a problem. I don't know why this is a thing, but it is. It is normal for these monsters to have various hidden penalties. As noting every single one would create a lot of clutter in the mod description, players can reasonably expect these monsters to be more difficult to fight, so in general, showing the entire list of penalties is not very necessary. Reasonable. However, the penalties against hexes is an outlier because it's much more significant compared to the other penalties. Yes. Agreed. I'm on board so far. Because it is so substantial while also being hidden from players, it is unlikely to be compensated for during build creation and creates a notable disadvantage for hex builds. We have removed both these penalties so that hexes will be consistently effective against all monsters in the game. Removed? Huh. Occultist League start? Okay. Big if true. All right, the Doom mechanic. This mechanic was shit. In theory, it was good, but it was always bad in practice. Another issue that we feel undermines hex build is the Doom mechanic. We've designed Doom with the goal of making self-cast hexes more effective than other more trivial applications of hex, such as blasphemy and hex touch support. The Doom mechanic was somewhat successful in its goal, but came at the cost of adding a lot of complexity to hex-related mechanics. Yeah, and also would only be relevant for the reason of hexing if the mobs lasted long enough for it to reach full effect, which only happened on bosses, which had such a reduced effect of hexes that it didn't matter. Right, so that's where Doom really fell short. We are removing the Doom mechanic. As a consequence, we'll be making several other changes to mechanics that previously interacted with Doom. For example, all the stats reference of Doom have been replaced with other curse-themed statistics. Hexblast has had a skill mechanic and damage adjustment to account for the loss of Doom scaling. Impending Doom has also had its base damage roughly doubled to compensate for this loss. We've replaced the Doomsday keystone with a new hex-themed keystone. Yo! I'm actually on board with I didn't think curses were a real big problem, but so far I'm liking this. This feels like a good list of changes. All right. Curse-related uniques. We've buffed a bunch of hex-related unique items and have reworked unique items that previously interacted with Doom, such as the Faded End unique ring. We've also added some powerful new uniques that interact with hexes. Anathema's Moonstone ring. Cast speed, 16% chance to gain a power charge when you cast a curse spell. Your curse limit is equal to your maximum power charges. I'm sorry. What? Excuse me? Huh. Huh. Occultist League start? Hello, Occultist League start? Alright, wait, no, maybe. Okay, moving on. This new ring lets you scale your curse limit in a completely different way by tying it to your power charge count, or you can simply not scale it and just put this on to apply 3 curses. True. Heretic's Veil. Ooh, +2. Ooh, 30% mana efficiency. Otherwise the same, I believe. A little tiny bit sad because we generally end up just putting in a woke blasphemy into this anyway and just not using this level 22 blasphemy because it's a level 22 blasphemy but it has no area of effect, no quality, no anything like that. But it's still 30% instead of 20 and an extra level, so that's nice. Might actually make it wearable again. Like that's actually pretty good. Here's an example of a rebalanced curse unique. The reservation efficacy mod has been buffed from 20 to 30 and the level of the curse from 1 to 2. Yep. Ensuring self-cast is powerful. In most cases, systems that facilitate somewhat automated gameplay, my favorite kind, like Hex Touch applying hexes automatically, should either come at a much higher cost or be less efficient. Please just be less efficient, not a higher cost. The cost of those things is already actually pretty high. You can make it less efficient, but don't make the cost higher, please. In some cases, both are needed to counterbalance the significant upside of automation. Otherwise, the option to automate will always be the obvious choice and eclipse the other more interactive game styles. The Doom mechanic was aimed at fulfilling this function for hexes, as is being replaced by alternative, simpler solutions. We have added penalties to both blasphemy and hex touch support, which grant less curse effect at all gem levels. Okay. Additionally, item mods that have specific hexes no longer do so with increased effect at all. We're not nerfing the increased effect, we're getting rid of the increased effect. This includes items where the hexes were meant to be a downside on the player, such as Coward's Change, Coward's Legacy, and Soul Mantle. Wait, we're getting rid of the increased effect, so it'll still be there. So we will still be able to get a ring with a curse. It'll now just be a level 1 curse forever. You know what? That's what I said at the beginning was I don't really care that much if you nerf my curse as long as you let the interaction still occur. The most important part of cursing on hit was that it was on, that the curse existed. I'm still going to do curse on hit. It also makes it a lot easier to corrupt your gloves into a curse on hit setup if having a curse is part of the build, because you no longer have to worry, do I have a 48 or a 40 pair? You either have it or you don't. So that got a little easier. It's fine. That's fine. Hex skill gem sailing. Different hex types are not evenly balanced when applied via hex on hit modifiers. Yeah, like vulnerability and despair. Yep. Some hexes, like vulnerability and despair, are much more powerful than others. This is because the hex on hit modifiers apply a hex equivalent to level 1 version of the hex skill, and some hexes are very strong at level 1 relative to their level 20 power. Because they scale more gradual way with gem levels, this means that in some cases using hex on hit is too powerful alongside the other benefits. Where we are stabilizing the gem scaling rate of hexes. In general, they should be twice as powerful at gem level 20 as they are at gem level 1. So like Ellie Week already was. But basically we're just going to bring the real powerful ones, the ones that had no flat numbers but percent. Bring them in line with things like Ellie Week, which it already was. That's fine. I'm alright with that. It's like a little bit of a nerf to like vulnerability and despair on hit builds, but it's not the worst. That's fine. Scaling curse effect. We feel there are currently too many sources of curse effect available. I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way at all. This has created a large power gap between players that have no investment in curses and those that heavily invest. Okay. I mean, there's also a large energy shield discrepancy between players that go CI and those who don't. What do you mean? When I invest in a mechanic, that mechanic gets stronger? You don't say. Okay. Which continually caused us to have the baseline curse effect of curses be lower than we'd like. All right. We are regulating the number of sources of curse effect throughout the game. This will also rein in the power of players building curse support characters. These changes have been focused on the less accessible sources of curse effect, such as Eldritch Implicits, the easiest source of curse effect, on helmets, rather than an accessible sources like those in the passive tree, which these are way higher investment. The ones in the passive tree cost way more. No, this is backwards. These are way less accessible. This everyone can have. Wait, okay. The curse effect notable on cluster jewels has also been replaced with other appropriate ones. For example, the one that used to grant flammability effect now allows your flammability hex to apply to hexproof enemies, and also causes your ignites on enemies to deal damage faster. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's interesting. If those numbers are high enough, like if that's like 8% faster or so, maybe even 6, if that's like 6 or 8 or more, and the other things go this way, that might be people who aren't making people who are not making curse bots, like supports, may actually still invest in like one curse cluster to go with their curses if those numbers are good enough. If it's like 2% or something, probably not going to care. But if it's like 6 to 8 or more, non-occultists are going to really probably try and fit one of these into their build. All right. Uh-oh. The occultist ascendancy class. We have removed the 15% increased effect of your curse, and enemies you curse have malediction. Oh, you got rid of malediction. Why? Maybe I don't make an occultist. All right, let's keep reading. Stat from the malediction notable in the occultist ascendancy. The your hexes can affect hexproof enemy stats has been moved from profane bloom to the malediction notable. We'll be renaming the notable passive as it no longer applies malediction to enemies who curse. Wait, so to get profane bloom, we now have to spend 4 ascendancy points instead of 2 to get both different portions of it, and then we no longer get malediction at all. Not in love with that. Not in love with that. Due to the significant increase in the power of hexes against the tougher monsters, the effect of this notable are still very strong. The removal of the hex penalty cannot be understated. Now, I agree with that. I'm all for removing this. I just removing malediction seems over the top. Anyway. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. As removal of the hex penalty cannot be understated, the massive buff to hexes especially applies to occultists because they have access to more hexes than other ascendancies. I mean, yeah, they're like, well, I mean, sort of. Do they though? Like, do they though? I mean, they sort of kind of just do a little bit, but then also you did just give everyone a ring that makes any class in the game able to reach the maximum amount of curses that anyone could possibly need, and then you took away the increased curse effect and the malediction stats. So is occultist even the curse stat ascendancy anymore? Didn't you just take that sort of identity away just then? Just like right now? Okay, moving on. The curse effect removed from the notable previously known as malediction has been moved onto the passive skill tree where it's available for everyone. This is important because while occultist is still a strong overall ascendancy for someone who wants to specialize in applying many hexes, it is not mandatory to play for someone who merely wants to apply really strong hexes. So we're all elementalists now then. Yeah, no, that sounds like an elementalist. We're all elementalists now. That's fine. I'm fine. Elementalist is one of my favorite ascendancies. Honestly, I love elementalist. I'll get the profane bloom explosiony things and we'll be an elementalist. It's fine. Temporal, chains, and enfeeble. The current balance of enfeeble and temporal chains makes them exceedingly strong against normal and magic monsters, while being relatively inefficient against pinnacle bosses. True. For example, a level 20 temp chains reduces a pinnacle boss's action speed by just 4%. That's actually stronger than I thought it was. I thought it was 3. My bad. You can get more than twice as much action speed reduction by any skill that chills. Yes. This is another case of hexes being weakest where they matter the most and strongest when they matter the least. Yes. Agreed. Because of the changes to curse effect, we're now able to make temporal change and enfeeble strong defensive options without requiring a large investment into curse effect. In addition to changes to their overall gem level and scaling, we're also planning on increasing we're also planning to increase the curse, rare, and unique enemies have X% less action speed modifiers on temporal chains, as well as increasing the curse, rare enemies to deal less damage on enfeeble. Increasing the deal less damage. This is a wording issue for me because I don't know if you're going to make that less effective again or more effective, because the tone of this whole paragraph tells me you're going to make temporal chains and enfeeble more effective against bosses. But the way this is written, the specific wording says you're going to make them weaker. We are also planning to increase the cursed, rare, and unique enemies have X% less action speed. This is poor wording because this sentence says we're going to make curses less effective on bosses. But the tone of the entire thing tells me that you're going to make it more effective. Or I guess you could also argue that increasing it would lower the decreased amount, but it's not a decreased amount, it's a less. And if you increase a less, it becomes more of a less. I'm pretty sure they're making the curses better here. Slightly questionable on the wording here, but like the whole tone of this is making curses better. I'm pretty confident this is making curses better. Like again, like this individual bit, they're gonna make those two curses better. It's more or less wording for PoE, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. The tone of the whole thing is like We want curses to be meaningful again. So they're making it better. Right. Vulnerability and despair. While working on the updated outline above, we took the opportunity to make some of the stat changes to vulnerability and despair to help while making the gems clearer. Okay. Cleaner, not clearer. They are now more focused on making enemies vulnerable to physical and chaos damage in ways that are more generically useful to any build dealing primarily physical or chaos damage. We will confirm the specifics of this. I'm worried about that sentence. I mean, I guess there's no point in being worried until we get the specifics, but I am. So, anyway. Hexblast has had its skill, mechanics, and damage adjusted to account for the loss of doom scaling. Broadly speaking, it does less damage at the very top end of gameplay, but getting into a fairly decent level is easier than before. It now removes a random hex from an enemy and will deal more damage with hits and ailments if a hex was removed this way. His damage is also more consistent, which is super important because you no longer need to wait for doom to build up. Okay, so that's actually really good. This is one of the main reasons that I didn't play it, is the inconsistency and the having to wait on timing that you have to like track in your own head. And I was just never any good at that shit, like at all. Just I'm not good at it. It required like actual skill and brain function, both of which I'm a little bit iffy on. So I never played it because I didn't like the idea and I knew it wouldn't work for me. But it does look very cool and it was pretty strong. So making it also consistent and getting rid of that sort of complexity from the build means Hexblast might actually be really good. I'm very interested to see what happens with Hexblast this league. That might make it quite good. Conclusions. In general, hexes will be stronger against tougher monsters and weaker against lesser monsters. We've removed Doom in order to simplify how hexes work, introduced penalties to automated hexes, methods to keep them from outclassing self-cast, and made several other balance changes. As a consequence of these overall change, please note the above blah blah blah. Subject to change. Alright. Okay, you know what? Overall, I think I'm mostly pretty happy here. I'm a little bit iffy about getting rid of malediction on the occultist. Feels a little overkill to me. I don't know if it's overkill. Even from like a balance perspective, it might actually be fine. But it feels like malediction is... It feels to me like malediction is part of the identity of occultist. And I am, like, over time getting a little bit sick of them stripping identity away from ascendancies to make everything very, very generic. I'm not like super in love with that trend, and it does keep happening over time. Like it just does sort of keep happening. It's just we're slowly moving in the direction of all of your ascendancies don't really matter and don't really have an identity, which I'm not super in love with. But the whole rest of it, all actually quite good. I started this thinking I don't really think curses are a problem. And I was right, they weren't a problem, but what I wasn't really getting is they also weren't very fucking useful. Like, I didn't think curses were a problem because for the most part, I just got curse on hit on gloves or a ring and then just ignored the mechanic on every build forever. Because they weren't really worth having unless you were a curse bot. And so I guess that was the problem, and I wasn't really seeing it, and this does seem to address a lot of it and look really good. So... I don't know, overall happy, little bit sad about my occultist. I mean, this is 4 manifestos, and there was only one manifesto that I came out of feeling really negative about. And there was one that I was just like, meh, I'm okay, and 2 that have made me happy, and 1 that made me very sad. So overall, manifestos have been pretty good. All right, cool.